What is up, my Shadowverse soldiers, and welcome back to another Shadowverse Evolved video. And alrighty, soldiers, in this video we're going to be talking about the Abysscaft reveals for sets 14 and 15. Now, I don't know too much knowledge of what's going to be happening. I know there are some cards that do have some Necrocharge support, and we do have Rule and I coming back, which, of course, for set 15 we do have our Omens coming back. So I am very excited to see what these cards are going to look like in sets 15. But as of 14, I am actually having no clue on what these cards are going to be. So speaking of 14, let's go ahead and get it into it. Alright, so starting off with BP14 Banquet of Dreams Abysscaft cards. Alright, without further ado, we have our first card, Itsurugi Eager Admirer. So she's a 2-cost 3/2. So you can advance her for 4 to banish this follower and then summon Itsurugi End of Paradise from your Evolved deck. Activate only if you have at least 5 festive cards or at least 10 Abysscaft cards in your cemetery. But when this follower comes into play, Fanfare, you put a Wolfling Struggle token into your EX area. Alright, so looking at this ability, of course, having the 10 Abysscaft cards in your cemetery is probably going to be something that this might be very generic for. But having the 5 festive cards, of course, is going to be a lot easier. But mind you, you can only do this on like turn 6 just because you're able to play this and then being able to spend the extra 4 play points to, advance this and banish it. But of course, having the requirements isn't going to be too crazy for Abysscaft because Abysscaft is just known for Necrocharge. Alright, so let's figure out what this Wolfling Struggle token does. So it's a 0-cost spell token. You can select any opponent on the field and deal it 1 damage, and you may discard a card, and if you do, you put the top card of your deck into your cemetery. Alright, so it looks like in the early turns we're going to be using this for removal, and now there aren't that many followers that have 1 defense, so if we're able to get a whole bunch of these tokens into the EX area, and the discard ability is optional, do mind you for that, but if you need to have, Necrocharge 10 and you want to have as many cards in your cemetery as possible, it's not that bad just because you are going to be minusing 1 in hand to get that extra cards in your cemetery. Alright, so let's figure out what the End of Paradise does do. So it's a 4-cost 6/5, and during your turn, whenever an enemy follower is put from the field into the cemetery, deal its leader 1 damage and give your leader 1 defense. When it comes into play Fanfare, you can select up to 3 enemy followers on the field, deal 5 damage to one of them, deal 2 damage to the remaining followers. Alright, so I'm not gonna lie, I really do like this Fanfare, but for a total of 6, I'm not really sure. So, of course, being able to deal 5 damage to an enemy follower is very nice. Of course, being able to that's usually the threshold is 5. So if it's over 5, then of course, you're definitely gonna have a bit harder time removing said cards. But of course, dealing 5 and then being able to proc this ability by dealing 1 damage to the enemy leader, healing ourselves for 1. And of course, those other 2 followers that have at least 2 defense, they're dealt with too, and they hit the cemetery and the static ability still goes off. So I think that's a lot happening in 1 turn if you're able to get all of this off. Alright, next up we have Paracelise, Demon of Greed. So she's a 3-cost 3/3. You can evolve from 1. You can activate only if there are 0 cards in your hand. But when she comes into play Fanfare, you put the top card of your deck into your EX area and then you discard a card. Alright, so 0 cards in your hand. So it looks like this is going to be the first card that's going to check that, hey, if you are only able to evolve this if you have 0 cards in your hand. So of course on Fanfare, you're able to put the top card of your deck into your EX area and then discard a card just in case, this is maybe one of the other cards of 2 that you have in your hand. You're able to go ahead and discard a card. But mind you, you're able to put the top card of your deck into your EX area regardless, even if you don't discard a card, because you do as much as you can, fulfill as much as you can. And then, if you don't have any cards in your hand, that's fine because you're able to go ahead and evolve this follower and keep going with the game plan of your handless Abyss deck. Alright, so looking at the Demon of Greed evolve, so she turns to a 4/4, and on evolve you select the enemy follower on the field and deal it 5 damage, then deal 2 damage to its leader and give your leader +2 defense, and then you put the top card of your deck into your EX area. Alright, so 1, I'm not gonna lie, I'm loving the fact that this is a 4/4 body, and you pay 4 play points for it, and you can deal 5 damage to a follower, and on top of that, you can deal 2 damage to its leader, and then healing yourself for 2, and then of course adding that extra card into your EX area that, realistically, your EX area being your hand this game. Alright, but next we have Anisage, Lost Forsaken. So she's a 2-cost 2/2, and when this card is discarded or banished from your hand, you put it into your EX area, but you can evolve her for 1. Ooh, we gotta love it when cards say when they're discarded, you can do this. And of course, in the handless deck, we're gonna be getting rid of a lot of cards out of our hand. So of course, we can go ahead and discard this out of the hand, out of the 1 cards that we can be discarding, put this card into our EX area. It's not essentially gone, and then we can go ahead and play this in the later turns. Alright, so looking at Anisage Evolve, so she turns to a 3/3, and on Evolve, you look at the top 4 cards of your deck. You may put a festive card from among them into your EX area and put the rest of the bottom of your deck in any order. So game plan after game plan, we do get to play this card, and we're looking at the top 4. Any festive card that we do want, we can just throw it into the EX area. It doesn't add to the hand because we want to have as less cards in our hand as possible. Alrighty, next up we have Frigid Necromancer. So she's a 6-cost 5/5. She has last words to banish this follower. She also can activate to engage this card. You can select a follower that costs 8 or less in your cemetery and then summon it and change its attack and defense to 1. So this card is a little interesting, I'd say. So hand in hand, I do believe Death's Breath is still a little bit better, even though we do get a 5/5 body off of this. And on top of that, we do get a bigger card, I believe. I think like eight or less. I think that's what Death's Breath still gets. But, you know, being able to get a follower, and we're really going to be getting these followers just for their fanfare effects, not for their swinging, just because they're going to have one attack and one defense. So, I mean, unless there's a follower that's so cracked that you need out of your cemetery to play again, and then being able to do whatever its effect to really justify that it only has one attack and one defense, then, you know, by all means. But of course, you know, it's just hand in hand. Do you want this 6 cost 5/5 body, or do you want to have Death's Breath with the follower that you do play having ward and having access to defense on the next turn? Alright, but next up we have Eternal Contract. So it's a 1-cost spell, so you can activate for 1 play point to banish this card from your cemetery. You can select up to 3 Paralyzed Demon of Greed in your cemetery or banish zone and return them to your deck. Then you shuffle your deck, and then you turn any number of face-up Paralyzed Demon of Greed in your evolved deck face down, and you can perform the following 2 times. Put the top card of your deck into your EX area and banish a card in your hand. Alright, so this is going to be the spell card that really triggers off nicely with Honest Sage, because Honest Sage says, hey, even if she's banished, she goes into your EX area. And of course, you know, getting rid of that 1 card out of your hand, you're getting rid of this card out of your hand, so you're minusing 2. We don't have that big of a hand size in Shadowverse Evolve here, so there's only so many cards we are going to be like drawing. You only draw 1 a turn realistically, so you're minusing 1 like every turn realistically. So having 0 cards and then recycling all your Paralyzed Demons of Greed is just going to be very nice, because we do want to keep, you know, cycling that evolved deck just so we can keep burning the enemy for 2, healing ourselves for 2, and then dealing a follower 5 damage, and then also probably getting rid of the Paralysis that very same turn. So there's a lot of things going on with this spell card when we are going to be going handless. Alright, and next up we have Brayard Vampire, which is a 1-cost 1/1. We can evolve it for 1. Alright, so looking at Brayard Vampire Evolve, so it turns into a 2/2, and on evolve you put the top card of your deck into your EX area, and then you discard a card. Alright, so I do believe this is going to be the card that really starts off you discarding your card. So of course, you know, you can go ahead and put the top card of your deck into your EX area and then discard a card, so you can go ahead and get rid of cards that you don't need. Or you can discard Honest Sage if you want to go ahead and start that Honest Sage turn and set up for the very next turn after that. Alrighty, next up we have Room Service Demon. So she's a 4-cost 4/4, and when she comes into play fanfare, you can select enemy fall on the field and deal it 3 damage. If there are 2 or less cards in your hand, you can cover 2 play points, and if they are 0, you can deal 2 damage to its leader. Alright, so 1, I want to go ahead and say I'm absolutely loving the art for this card, and 2, on top of that, by the time we get to turn 4, we should have around 2 or less cards in hand, so being able to play this for essentially 2, and then being able to deal 3 damage to a follower, and if we already have 0 cards in our hand, we can go ahead and start pinging the enemy leader for 2, which is probably going to be a common reoccurrence with these cards, as we are going to have 0 cards in our hand. Alrighty, and next we have Undying Resolve, which is a 2-cost spell card. So when this card is discarded or banished from your hand, you can select an Abysscaft follower on your field and give it Bane. But it also, when you do play, you can select a festive follower that costs 2 or less in your cemetery and then summon it. If the selected follower is Honest Sage, Lost Forsaken, you can give it +1 attack and Storm. Alright, so being able to play out the Honest Sage after we've already discarded and played it from the EX area, and then played it again by being able to look at the top 4 and then putting a festive card into our EX area. Once we do trade it into a follower, and once she's already done her damage, we can go ahead and play the spell card, get the most out of the next Honest Sage that we are going to be playing to give her +1 attack. We can evolve her again if we want to, so we can get that extra damage, and then her having Storm can go ahead and swing in for some damage. Alrighty, next we have Silver Nail Blaster. So it's a 2-cost 3/2. You can evolve it for 5, but when it comes to play fanfare, you can select enemy fall on the field and deal it 2 damage, and then you discard a card. Alright, so I think this is going to be quite the tempo play, being able to spin this for 2, dealing an enemy follower for 2. We can go ahead and discard a card, just because that's what our deck is going to want to be doing in Handless Abyss. And of course, we're not going to really be getting any like good value off of discarding a card, because most of the time, for the other cards we've seen so far, we discard a card and then we already have the top card of our deck into our EX area, so we essentially replaced a card in our hand. Alright, so then we have the Blaster Evolve. So she turns into a 5/4, and then on evolve you select enemy fall on the field and deal it 4 damage, and then deal 4 damage to its leader, and then you discard a card. Alright, so like I said before, do as much as you can until you can't anymore, and if we are going to be playing, you know, Handless Abyss, this is going to be quite the top deck, especially in the later turns, just because we're going to be dealing 4 damage to the enemy follower and 4 to its leader. So this might be the finisher for the deck if we don't already have the resources to finish our opponent. Alright, but next we have Parkour Werewolf. So he's a 4-cost 4/4. This follower doesn't take ability damage, but it does have a strike ability to deal 2 damage to each enemy leader and give your leader +2 defense. You can also activate for an extra 2 play points to give this follower Storm. Alright, so these bronze cards are going to be quite the late game cards and quite the top deckers. So if you have a total of 6 play points, you can go ahead and play this follower and then give it Storm so it's able to swing the very same turn. You're essentially dealing 6 damage in one turn and then healing yourself for 2. Alrighty, next we have Bat Usher. So it's a 1-cost 2/2, and when it comes to play Fanfare, if there are 2 or less cards in your hand, you can give this follower +1 attack, and if there are 0 cards, you can give this follower Storm. Alright, so it looks like these bronze cards are going to be the cards that are really going to be helping us. So of course, you know, if this is the top deck that you get, you're able to get a 3/2 with Storm, which is pretty nice for 1 play point. And then of course the other cards that are going to be in your EX area you can play too, just because you already have the requirements of 0 cards in your hand. Alright, but next up we have Creeping Malice, which is a 2-cost spell card. So it's a quick. You can select an enemy following the field and deal it 5 damage and then deal 3 damage to your leader. Now I will say this is a pretty nice spell card, I'd say, especially dealing yourself 3 damage to deal an enemy follower 5. And it'll be pretty nice in Sanguine, especially if you need to hit a certain threshold of the life. So I think that's pretty nice. But on top of it, like it being a quick, don't know how often we are going to be using this on our opponent's turn, but especially on our turn if we need to deal something 5, I think that's going to be pretty nice for Sanguine. Alright, and lastly we have Full Moon Leap, which is a 1-cost spell, so you can select an Abysscaft follower in your field and give it +1 attack, and if there are 0 cards in your hand, you can give it Storm. Alright, so I believe this card will be paired up very nicely with Paracelise. So of course, you know, you spend the 1 play point, you have 0 cards in your hand, you can give the Paracelise 1 attack. She's going to have Storm, so she's going to be a 5/4 with Storm, and then on top of that, she already did the 2 damage from her Evolve effect, and then, you know, healing yourself for 2, and when you do have the 0 cards in your hand, you're able to go ahead and swing in for 5. Alrighty, and then we have our alt art for set 14 here. So it's going to be the Eternal Contract spell card for the Paracelise Handless Abyss deck. That's going to be quite the deck to be playing for set 14. So I hope you soldiers are going to be looking forward to either picking this card up or at least seeing it, because this card looks absolutely amazing just right here. So I wonder what this card is going to look like in person. Alright, so let's not waste too time and moving into BP15 Trial of the Omens. As she makes her wonderful return, we have Valnarique Lustful Desire. So she's a 2-cost 2/2. She can evolve for 1, and while Sanguine is active for you, this follower has Storm. But when she comes into play Fanfare, if your leader's defense is 7, give this follower +2/+2. And look at that, we meet again. And I just almost forgot that Valnarique was an Omen for Abysscaft. I always thought it was just Rulanai, but Valnarique is the Omen. So being able to have Sanguine active in the Lust deck is something that's always going to be happy. Like every turn Lust has a turn, they're going to be pinging themselves and they're going to have Sanguine active. So that's what I really do like about the deck. And then these cards that we do play, the Sanguine is going to be active, so these followers are going to have Storm, or we're going to be pinging followers for how many times we've taken damage. But hitting that threshold of 7 is very dangerous. So of course our opponent is going to be cracking back at us with damage and stuff like that. So when we get to that threshold of 7 defense, hopefully we're able to heal past that after we do play this card. Alright, so looking at the Lustful Desire Evolve, so she turns into a 3/3, and while Sanguine is active for you, this follower still has Storm. But on Evolve, you choose one of the following. You can either 1, put a Wings of Desire token into your EX area, or you can 2, draw a card. Alright, so we absolutely love when cards are able to replace themselves on the Evolve ability, but let's figure out what this Wings of Desire token does for this deck. Alright, so looking at the Wings of Desire, so it's a 1-cost spell token. You can select a follower on your field and give it Strike. Deal damage to each enemy follower on the field equal to the number of times your leader has lost defense this turn, and then deal 1 damage to your leader. Alright, so it looks like this is going to be the card that just gives herself Storm automatically. So of course, we didn't really get into it into the Evolve side. So of course, if we have 7 or less defense and we've already pinged ourselves below the 7, the Evolved Valnarique will be a 5/5 with Storm. And then being able to ping yourself for 1 extra damage for how many times you've pinged, you can deal that to all the followers on the field, which is pretty nice. And you can go ahead and ping yourself for 1 just so you can already get that Storm on Valnarique. Alright, but we are moving on into Rulanai Screaming Silence. So he's a 2-cost 2/1, and he has Rush and Assailable. When he comes into play Fanfare, you select an enemy follower on the field, and if there are at least 3 Rulanai Screaming Echoes on your field, you destroy the selected follower and deal its leader 3 damage. But also has last words to put a Scream Diffusion token into your EX area, and then you bury the top card of your deck. Alright, so looking at this card, it looks like we're going to be having at least 3 Rulanai Screaming Echoes on our field for, you know, probably whatever the effects of these other cards are going to be. So being able to just hard remove a follower while also pinging the enemy leader for 3 is something we're going to be able to do. On top of that, we do have a follower with Rush and Assail, which will be able to proc the last words for putting the Scream Diffusion token to our EX area. So I'm wondering how this is all going to work. Alright, so let's look at the Rulanai Echoing Scream. So it's a 2-cost token follower that's a 2/1 with Rush and Assail. Alright, so it looks like we're going to have a board full of these cards. So, of course, as long as we have those 3 cards, that being this, onto the field, and then we play the Rulanai, we can go ahead and hard remove something, and then being able to deal the enemy leader for 3. And then, of course, all of these followers are going to have Rush and Assail, so we're able to swing into those pesky reserved followers, and then start doing damage. Alright, but let's look at Scream Diffusion. So it's a 2-cost spell token, so for every 5 cards in your cemetery, you summon a Rulanai Screaming Echo token. Alright, so basically you need 15 cards in the cemetery for the Rulanai Screaming Echo tokens to be the 3, and then when you do play the Rulanai, of course this is going to be a pretty cheap play since this is only going to cost a total of 4. You just need to make sure you have the 15 Necrocharge realistically to being able to do this entire effect. Alright, and long but not forgotten, we have Gensetsu Terror Banquet. So she's a 4-cost 3/5, and whenever another yokai follower leaves your field, you can select enemy follower in the field and deal it and its leader 1 damage. And when she comes into play Fanfare, you summon 2 One-Tailed Fox tokens, but you can spend an extra 2 play points on Fanfare to summon in One-Tailed Fox token and give each other yokai follower on your field +1 defense. Alright, so it's good to see Gensetsu back, I'm not gonna lie to you. So these One-Tailed Foxes are going to proc the static ability. If we do need to rush into a follower, we can start dealing damage to the enemy leader, which is pretty good. And of course, you know, if you're playing this in the yokai deck, if you already have yokais established, being able to go ahead and just play this card and then you start trading in for damage and stuff like that, you can start pinging, and these One-Tailed Foxes are going to come in and then they're able to keep pinging as well. Or if you're playing on the back end, you need to play more defensively, being able to spend a total of 6 play points to get these 1/4 wards out is going to be pretty nice too. Alright, but next we have Yuzuki Bloodlord. So she's a 2-cost 2/2, and you can evolve for 1, but when she comes into play Fanfare, you select enemy fall on the field. If there are at least 10 cards that cost 2 in your cemetery, you can destroy it. Alright, so 2-cost Abyss is getting some support here and some love. So if you have 10 cards that cost 2, which of course in the 2-cost Abyss deck, there aren't going to be that many cards that aren't 2-cost. So being able to hard remove something for 2 is pretty nice. Alright, so looking at Yuzuki Evolve though, so she turns into a 3/3, but on Evolve you look at the top 2 cards of your deck. You may put a card that costs 2 from among them into your EX area, and it costs 2 less to play this turn, and you put the rest of the bottom of your deck in any order. You know, imagine you manage to hit Vuela off of this, and then when you play Vuela from your EX area and then you do Vuela's ability, it's like you're filling up the board with 2 costs. So you're definitely going to be flooding the board with a lot of cards. Alright, but next we have Spiteful Screams, which is a 2-cost spell card. So when playing this card, Necrocharge 10, this card costs 1 less to play. You can select an Abysscaft follower that costs 2 or less with last words in your cemetery and then summon it. I am actually slowly forgetting that the Rulanai was a 2-cost card too. So off of the Yuzuki ability, you're able to go ahead and play Rulanai as well, which I didn't, you know, like, grasp upon, by the way. So of course, this being a 1-cost card if you have the Necrocharge 10, and realistically we want to optimally have Necrocharge 15, so we're able to do the whole bunch of Rulanai plays in 1 turn. So playing this for 1 to start doing the Rulanai stuff is going to be absolutely insane. Alright, but next we have a Hellish Banquet, which is a 0-cost spell card, so you can activate to banish this card from your cemetery to give each One-Tailed Fox on your field Storm. When playing this card, you can bury 2 cards named One-Tailed Fox as an additional cost, and this card can't be played without paying the additional cost. You can select enemy fall in the field and destroy it, and then draw a card. Alright, so I'm not gonna lie to you, this spell card is really nice with the gold Gensetsus that plays the whole bunch of One-Tailed Foxes for free, so we can go ahead and play this spell card to go ahead and remove 2 of them. Gensetsu's going to get the buff because they're going to hit the cemetery, they're removed from the field, and then we get to hard remove a follower instead of swinging into those followers with our One-Tailed Foxes. We do get to replace that card out of our hand, which is pretty nice, and then on that same turn we can banish this card from the cemetery once we play all our other One-Tailed Foxes to start swinging in for some storm damage. Alright, and next we have Adherent of Desire, which is a 1-cost 1/1, and we can evolve her for 1, but when she comes into play, Fanfare, we can deal 1 damage to your leader, and if there's a follower with Valnaric in its name on your field, you can evolve this follower. Alright, so like I said, with the Lust deck, we're going to be doing a lot of pinging ourselves in 1 turn, and of course, if Valnaric's on the field, we do get to ping ourselves for 1. Valnaric is going to have Storm, and then of course, Valnaric being on the field, we can evolve this for free, and then we can evolve an extra time through game mechanics, of course, just because this already eats up that ability of, hey, yeah, you can do this for free since in the Fanfare it says evolve it. Alright, but looking at Adherent of Desire Evolve, so she turns into a 2/2, but on Evolve, you select the Omen/Demon follower on your field and give it Drain. Alright, so this card pairs perfectly in the deck, I'd say. So of course, hitting that threshold of having 7 defense or less, Valnaric will be a 4/4, and then when you evolve her, you can turn her into a 5/5. You have Valnaric on the field, you can play this for 1, and you can evolve it, giving her the Drain so you can heal yourself for 5. And of course, if you're at 7, then that's nice, so you can go ahead and heal yourself back up to 12, so it'll be a little bit harder for your opponent to finish you. Alrighty, next we have Loathing Desire, which is a 1-cost spell. So you can deal 1 damage to your leader. You can look at the top 4 cards of your deck. You may reveal an Omen/Demon card from among them and add it to your hand. You put the rest of the bottom of your deck in any order. And if you revealed a follower with Valneric in its name, you give your leader +2 defense. Alright, so being able to ping yourself for one, going ahead and looking at the top 4 for any of the Omen/Demon cards, which most of the time those are going to be the 2 requirements for the cards in your deck when you're playing Lust. So of course, being able to get you the legendary Valneric is going to let you heal too, so you can get that 1 defense back. On top of that, adding that 1 extra back, so especially on turn 1, I think this is going to be a nice searcher. Alrighty, next we have Crimson Virtue, which is a 2-cost spell. So when playing this card, you can engage 2 followers that cost 2 on your field. This card costs 1 less to play, and this card costs 1 less to play if there's a card with Yuzuki in its name on your field. You can select any follower on the field and deal it 4 damage. Alright, so this will really help out with those 2-cost cards being in your cemetery, especially since this card will be 1 less if you have the 2 followers that you can engage, which, let's be honest, when we do play a whole bunch of those 2-cost followers, we're not going to be swinging with them in the very same turn most of the time. So being a 1-cost card, and if you do have the Yuzuki on your field, this is essentially free. And of course on the Yuzuki, you can just hard remove something off of Fanfare if you have those 10 2-cost cards, but being able to just deal 4 damage to an enemy follower can help too. Alrighty, next we have Adherent of Screams, which is a 2-cost 2/2, and you can evolve this follower for 1, but last words you bury the top card of your deck. Alright, so before I get into this card's ability, I will say that this card definitely looks like Cabal. So I don't know how many Mortal Kombat fans are here, or any Mortal Kombat players like play Abysscaft or are interested, but this definitely looks like Cabal. Now, outside of that, this is definitely going to be going in the 2-cost Abyss. Every time we see a 2-cost card, it's like, hey, this is fuel for the 2-cost Abyss. And I think that's really where Rule and I is going to be sitting now, this new one, just because we're going to have a whole bunch of 2-cost cards. And, we're just going to be putting a whole bunch of 2-cost cards and having 15 cards in Cemetery. So we're able to do the whole Rule and I effect. But of course, this is just going to help by, playing this card. We're really probably going to be evolving this card, because just having a card that says, hey, last words, and it doesn't have rush or ward means, hey, we need to evolve this to get the most out of this card. Alright, so looking at Adherent of Screams evolve, so he turns into a 3/3, but on evolve we choose one of the following. You can either 1, select a follower in your cemetery with Rule and I in its name and then summon it, or 2, select an enemy follower in the field and deal it 2 damage, and also has last words to bury the top card of your deck. Alright, so of course, if we're going to be needing Necro Charge 15, it's not going to be often where we don't already have Rule and I into our cemetery. So playing the Rule and I from our cemetery is still going to proc his Fanfare effects. Now it's going to be kind of weird if we don't have the 15, like when we do get the Rule and I and we do hit 14. That is going to be very weird for this card, just because we're adding 1 extra card from, removing 1 extra card from our cemetery to go ahead and play Rule and I. Rule and I doesn't make us discard a card or anything like that. So we'll be doing the Rule and I in a weird, awkward position. So make sure you have that 15 threshold, or it's technically 16 when playing this card. And then of course in the early turns, you can do the second ability to deal 2 damage to a follower, and then swing into that said follower for a total of 5, or dealing 2 to 1 and then swinging 3 for the other to go ahead and get this last words to bury the top card of your deck. Alright, and looking at Hermit of Lust, so she's a 2-cost 1/3, so when she comes into play Fanfare, you give your leader -1 defense, give this follower Intimidate. You can also activate to give your leader another -1 defense to give this follower +1 attack, and you can activate only once per turn. Alright, so I do want to say I absolutely love the art for this card here, and on top of that, this gives us the -2 effect that we might need for the Valneric spell card token that's in our EX area that'll really help us, deal damage to the entire board. Alright, but next we have Hermit of Silence, which is a 6-cost 5/5, and when this follower comes into play Fanfare, you select any follower on the field and destroy it, and its owner discards a random card. Alright, so I know this is a bronze card, but I do think the value in it is gold, just because when you are playing this in silence, your opponent is kind of like playing the cards that they are playing from their hand. Unless they're drawing a whole bunch of cards out of their hand, we are going to be getting to the late game, so spending 6 to get a 5/5 body that does hard remove something, and then on top of that, we do get to make them discard a random card as well. It's just a lot of value in one turn when we get into those turn 6 and stuff like that. Alright, but next up we have Krampus, which is a 4-cost 4/4. When it comes to play Fanfare, you bury another follower, select an enemy follower in the field and destroy it. Give your leader +1 defense, and then you bury the top 2 cards of your deck, and then you draw a card. So this is going to be a nice card to trigger any of the last words of the cards that might not have been triggered the very next turn. So being able to swing with that follower and then bury that follower's last words do get to go off, but make sure you do finish the effects of Krampus first. So being able to play this and then destroying a follower and then giving your leader +1 defense, burying the top 2 cards of your deck is very nice, so you can get that Necro Charge up as fast as possible while also replacing the Krampus you did just play. Alrighty, and lastly we have Astral Projection. So it's a 4-cost spell card and it's a quick, so you can select any follower in the field and destroy it, and then you bury the top 2 cards of your deck. Alright, so I don't know how often you are going to have 4 play points up on your opponent's turn, just because we are going to kind of be moving away from that. But I think in Control Abyss or Mid-Range Abyss, this is just still a nice card to go ahead and bury the top 2 cards of your deck, just being able to mill the top 2, and then hard removing a follower. Alrighty, and then lastly we have our alt art for this set. So this card does look pretty nice. Now I am sad that Valnerique doesn't have the alt art for the Omens this time, but of course, you know, we can't have the cake and eat it too. I am just very happy that Valnerique is in this set with the Omens. Of course, I know she's an Omen and she is going to be with the Omens, but I'm just glad that there's some more support for the deck. Hopefully the deck will be at least like tier 3, maybe like just the deck is playable, don't get me wrong, but you know, this extra support might boost it up and make it even more playable or more seen. But of all of you soldiers that are out there that are looking towards to picking this card up, I hope you're able to acquire it. And alrighty soldiers, that is all of the cards for sets 14 and 15 for Abysscaft. Now as of uploading this video, I have noticed that they did do the English translations already and they are on the website. So I do highly, you know, suggest that you do check those cards out on the website. If the website's working, you know my relationship with the website and how I have a disdain for it. So, but no more updates, I'd say. Please keep looking forward to the rest of the videos. I'm going to try and finish the rest of these reveals off this weekend. I might be putting the cards with the actual English translations in these videos too, but I already have like everything with the Japanese setup, so we'll see what I'll be doing this weekend. Alright soldiers, make sure you are safe in whatever you do tonight and safe whatever you do for the rest of the year. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.
Yeah. TRINN just to get you away. What I got to do, what I got to do.